Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 23 of IGEL Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. This is our, I don't know if I talk about this much, but we've got our corporate edition IGEL podcast, and then we've got our community edition, and then we rotate every other week. Well, Chris and I have we've been on vacation, so we missed the one with Seb last week, and we'll pick it up again next week. But this is our corporate blog review. Chris, how's it going?
Feeling refreshed, coming off of just over a week plus of vacation, so hit the ground running yesterday, so feeling good.
So are you truly feeling refreshed or just kind of reset? And here's why I asked the question. I just got off vacation too. We went to 3 national parks. We went to Las Vegas. We went to Southern California. My daughter had her smartwatch on, and she and I probably went toe for toe in terms of number of steps and places we went and runs and hikes. She had 300,000 steps.
That's crazy. That's amazing. I didn't count that many. We did some exploring while we were on vacation. We were out in the 50th state. For those that don't know which one that is, I'll let them guess. Somewhere tropical. And we did a lot of exploring. That island has a lot to offer as far as landscapes. We went into a park and went up to a waterfall. We did another hike up to the top of Diamond Head. Saw that. That was a good hike. It was our first day. Did some exploring around the beaches, did some runs like that. So it was a good mix, plus some swimming, which is always nice.
Yeah. I haven't been to Honolulu or Oahu since I was a kid. I would love to go do a hike up Diamond Head. I guess that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was neat because, they say you get there early. And so we left a little bit later than probably when we got in. We're pulling into the main area where you park, and we get there and the sign said lots completely full. And I was basically going to drop the family off and then go park somewhere in the neighborhood, which was probably another, 10 minutes to go find a parking spot. But right as I was getting ready to do that, the guy said, wait, pull in here. And then I was like, how much do I pay you? So I just handed him some money, and we were able to park, and that saved us a ton of time. And then we were able to just, get in and get our tickets and walk up. But when you're looking at it, you're like, man, that thing is pretty high from the vantage point. But when you get up there and you look down, you're like, man, it's an amazing sight. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah. Yeah, we went to Zion and Zion National Park, and that was our 3rd park we went to. And there was a hike called Angel's Landing that I did 2 days in a row. I got up at 4 a.m. 3 days in a row in order to beat the crowds, and there was still a crowd. But 4 a.m. 3 days in a row to do a hike.
Yeah, well, I tried that. I was on East Coast time for at least a couple of days, and then started getting adjusted to the time zone difference. But the flight back was pretty long, and the adjustment, I kind of tried to stay up after the red eye, but around 10 o'clock Friday night, I was like, I'm done. But I did get some good sleep. I think that's what I meant with refreshed. But the inbox is full again. I have nothing to complain about. I know what you get roughly.
If anybody's listening and needs me, just call me, because I gotta hit delete here in a little bit. There's no way.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, you brought a good topic today. We're following up on the topic from the other day, which is that end user compute conversation around user experience. And when I posted this on LinkedIn and other places, I talked about how it's always most important to have happy end users. They may not need to be perfectly happy, but they need to be content with the user experience, and it needs to be functional and secure. And I think we're going to follow up today with some more talk around end user experience, right?
Yeah, survey said 61% were concerned about delivering that productive, satisfying user experience in this new model where most everybody is working either remotely or hybrid, work from anywhere kind of thing. I can't tell you how many people we ran into on vacation where they, in some cases, they packed up and went somewhere for 3 months and worked literally from there because they could. And we had some interesting conversations there. Not too much shop talk, if you know what I mean. But it was neat to just talk to people and get a sense of how things were for them in the last year, especially now that people are beginning to travel again. And but yeah, this is sort of following up on that survey, and we'll talk a little bit about today with IGEL and Citrix.
Yeah. So the title of this blog, and I want to come back and hit on something you just said in a second, but IGEL and Citrix delivering an exceptional collaborative experience, and that's really been the biggest reach in all this, is being able to be collaborative around real-time communication applications, Zoom, Teams, WebEx, GoToMeeting, all that stuff inside the virtual environment. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But I do have a question for you on something you brought up. And I ran into people too that are working remote, or people that have picked up and left town, whatever town they lived in. And I'm also going through the hiring process. What are we in a bad situation where people have become spoiled with the ability to work from anywhere, and now they don't want to live where they lived before, and that might be where their job is, but they've feel like they're entitled to go live anywhere they want to because the technology has proven that it can do it. Is that setting us up as a country and other folks is it setting us up for failure, where people have decided that they can work wherever they want and their employer is just going to have to deal with it?
It's a great question. I was reading an article this morning in a similar note, as restaurants and bars and places like that are beginning to open up, the workers aren't coming back because they couldn't work remotely, obviously, in that particular scenario, but they got a chance to kind of reset, the life that they were living, and realize that, okay, if I'm being furloughed or whatever, it's an opportunity for me to address some lingering things that have been on my mind, or maybe it's physical issues or whatever. And they started looking at doing something different. To your question, I think for those that weren't used to, like you and I, we've been living this work from home, work from anywhere life. For me personally, it's coming up on 20 years. I'm kind of used to that experience, to the point where would I ever go back into an office on a regular basis kind of thing. So it's not so big a hit for me. But for others that were getting that for the first time and realizing, I can actually have a life and do this. I think we are beginning to see that shift. Now, the other thought I had was, for those that feel like they're entitled to that, I will say, given the size of our country, you're going to have some of that probably, and we have seen where that maybe they realize, wow, I actually have more choices available to me, which means I can actually pursue opportunities with companies not in my state, whereas before that might have been in a technology role where I was like a sales job where you cover a territory, right? You're kind of used to not working in one particular state. So it'll be interesting, right? To see what the long-term effect of this is. So
for me, it kind of ties into what we're going to talk about here today, which is the human collaborative piece. And I think we've proven that you can do it online when you have to, but there also needs to be that element of in-person some. We've got situations where we have maybe salespeople that don't live in a territory that they cover sometimes. And when you do get together in territory, it does make it makes an impact on the human relationship that doing it like you and I are right now, collaborating online, just isn't quite the same.
No, it's not. I think we were not built to live this life isolated, period, full stop. We need relationships, and that's not just in work, but in life. And, as concerned I was at sometimes being as crowded as some of the places we were on vacation, honestly, it was a breath of fresh air given the last year plus that we dealt with. And it was a joy in some cases to be out there living, experiencing life, with some of the fun activities we were doing, because we just hadn't had that in a long time. And so I think to the point, I think there is definitely benefit of having that collaborative work. We were getting ready to have some QBRs in person for a while we've decided to kind of halt on that maybe for now, and then maybe re-look at that in the maybe Q4 October timeframe again. But yeah, I think we were all kind of looking forward to seeing one another again, physically. So I just think there is definitely benefit, and also not having to be this Zoom life, right? I mean, shut it off and do interaction in person, right? I mean, plus the opportunity to have some just, breaking bread is what I like to call it, right? We're just getting together and having a meal and getting to know one another.
Yeah, I think there's an element of, first of all, I had a similar experience to you. It was kind of nice to be around people again. Now I was getting up at 4 a.m. and getting in the front of the line and meeting people while I was at the front of the line. Had I been in the back of the line waiting to get on a shuttle bus to go up for a hike with 1,000 people in front of me, that would have been, I probably would have had a different opinion. But I guess it's not unlike me to put the extra effort in to be first, but still enjoy the human part of the experience.
Yeah. Well, I'd expected nothing less from you, Andy. I mean, 4 a.m. wake-up calls on vacation. But you got to do what you got to do if you want to see some of those places and those sites.
Without people. I mean, we wanted to get there in time where we could experience it without thousands of people tromping all these things. Well, let's talk about this first blog. It's by Dan O'Farrell from June 28th of this year. Mm-hmm. And I think he's kind of set it up, and maybe you could just cover his introduction here, but he's kind of talking about what we're talking about here, which is the need to experience this frictionless engagement online with people, and how that's evolved during this period.
So what I like is earlier we talked about this word collaboration. I want to kind of zone in on that for a minute. What I've seen as, these unified comms features began to get developed and gone to market with Citrix and Teams, for example, and Zoom. It has been a collaborative effort between the different companies, and internally, just sharing the knowledge internally on how to piece it all together. There's been a lot of updates from both Citrix and Teams and Zoom, like these little VDI plugin clients things, and trying to get all these things working well, mapping this experience to the right type of endpoint. Does it have enough horsepower to handle some of the things that I'm trying to do to make that a great user experience? And so the last year, more or less, has been a lot of collaboration to bring all these things together. What the solution brief kind of really talks about is, with our Citrix relationship, which is probably our biggest one within IGEL, we've gotten to a point where day one support, if they come out with a new Linux client, new feature sets and stuff, fixes, whatever, we've got that ready to go like the next day. And so that collaborative effort has been driven internally by some folks, but it's been great to see that, because we all know that at the end of the day, it's our customers that benefit, and we're all in here we wouldn't be here without customers at the end of the day. So,
well, and the number stated here is 61% has the collaborative piece as a top concern for delivering a productive, satisfying user experience. And I've said for 20 years now that's the hardest piece. And the alternative has always really been to tell people to get out of their virtual desktop session or even their virtual app session and do a native experience. And that's just not an easy thing to coach people into. And you tell them over and over again how great this user experience is going to be in their virtual desktop. And then all of a sudden you say, well, but for this one thing, you need to get out, or you need to use, phone audio versus doing computer audio. And I think we have the pandemic to think that this next section talks about being on version 3 of this collaborative effort. I think we have the pandemic to thank for accelerating that. We're probably a year or 2 or 3 ahead of where we would have been had it not been for the catalyst that's happened.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think a shared experience maybe it's if we take it to the neighborhood level, right? We all get crushed by the storm, whether it's snow, in our country, area of the country, hurricanes. We go through a sharing. We're all out there helping clean up or working together. The pandemic put us all in the same sort of situation, and it kind of forced people, especially to respond to the customer demand. And having been in a product management role, that really is what, in many cases, you're mapping where you focus your efforts based on customer demand. And sometimes you take bets on this is where we think the market's going. And so you try to get ahead of where everybody else is on that bell curve kind of thing. Sometimes you win, sometimes your competition's right there with you, or you got to pivot and you go elsewhere. But I think in this particular situation, the focus began to emerge that, we have to make this a great experience because businesses, the economy, and many things really depended on, people to be able to do. And look at the, I don't know which, it might be AT&T or Verizon or something, right? You're seeing these commercials now. I saw one last night on the Home Run Derby. Giancarlo Stanton and the other slugger, Aaron Judge, were talking to each other, right? And they were like getting advice, like, "Hey, what do you do before you kind of go out the hit?" And Aaron Judge was saying something like, "I go, to the Little League games or whatever like that." And then what Giancarlo heard was he goes and crushes Little League pitchers. And so, and it was like a little blurb, kind of that user experience, that little blip, and it was about the network and the user experience. And next thing you know, they have a picture, a video of Giancarlo hitting Little League baseball players balls like to the next moon or whatever. It's a funny commercial, but it kind of played on that user experience of not having a good network, right? And so we've all kind of experienced something like that probably in the last year, where somebody's audio goes out and that type of thing, and you didn't quite catch what they were saying or whatever. But yeah, just out of curiosity, has this changed the way you look at when you bring new hires on? What type of experience do you want to give them day one, week one?
Yeah, I'm sitting here pausing because I your baseball example. I had a run in front of the Bellagio in Las Vegas with a Major League Baseball player that thought that he had the right to tell myself and my family to move so he could do a picture with his family. And his statement was how much money he had. And I'm like, I don't care how much money you have. We've been sitting here 30 minutes. We're going to get our picture. So I'm a little turned off on professional baseball at the moment. Nonetheless,
there's a lot of individuals in that sport, but yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, that still bothers me a little bit. Anyway, so let's talk about what we've done differently here at XenTegra. It's just accelerated our need to get it right. And there's two ways, right? There's the best way, which is through leveraging smart technology and software, like we're going to talk about here, and what IGEL is doing with Citrix to offload that experience so that it's a native experience, even though it's accessed through the virtual environment. At the same time, just to be safe and just to have what you need, we're also investing. We've invested heavily in the last 6 months in making sure that we had NVIDIA-based solutions in our backend servers, so that we had both pieces in place. So that if it's going to be done on the back end, it's going to be done with the best bandwidth, using SD-WAN type technologies and NVIDIA graphics cards to offload the processing of what had to happen on the back end. And then if possible, we are offloading it through technologies like IGEL and the Citrix Workspace app. It's become close to perfect in our world. We've got a couple of things to work on, but we're really, really close to making it to where we don't have to tell users to work around the scenario anymore. They can just use the solution, and the solution will have the power and this intelligence it needs.
That's a great point. Yeah. I'm sitting there as you were talking, the week, I think we both went on vacation. We came out with a couple updates on the unified comms front. We had some new versions that we integrated from both Cisco in terms of the WebEx pieces, the JVDI stuff, as well as Zoom plugins. And there's also a new version of the Citrix Workspace app. And then I'm looking here, we also added support or improved support for NVIDIA GPUs with our display switch, right, which is a feature in the product that allows you to, we got multiple monitors and all that stuff. So little incremental updates and fixes over the last year. These are the things that have, been driven a lot by what we talk about here is and really making sure that user experience is optimal.
So Chris, in my brain, there's three ways to do this. One is the back-end horsepower with the infrastructure piece and NVIDIA. The other ways are leveraging the Citrix Workspace app and the integration it has into these unified communication tools so that it offloads this to the endpoint. And then there's also what I call hijacking, where a solution like IGEL has a Zoom client running on it, or maybe WebEx client, certainly Zoom as far as I know, and maybe this is evolved. And it sees this connection happening and it hijacks it and uses it on the local endpoint. Where do we stand in terms of just being able to have the Nirvana, which I think is what Citrix and VMware and others want, where their client can just do this for you for X, Y, and Z app? Is it just a Teams world where they can do that, or is it becoming where they can leverage the Workspace app, Citrix Workspace app, for other collaborative platforms?
So yeah, for Citrix, for an IGEL specifically, we've got the Teams optimization piece. Zoom is also available, as well as I'm looking here at one of these profiles, WebEx. So I'm looking for us. If you follow along in a profile under Sessions, Citrix Global, under Unified Comms, there's three options: VDI Solutions, which has Microsoft Teams optimization, Zoom VDI Media plugin built in. There's still Skype for Business using the HDX RTME. And then for Cisco, we've got WebEx Meetings VDI, WebEx VDI, and the Cisco JVDI client. All of those are built in to be available for customers that might be on one or both platforms migrating to something, whatever. So we've kind of got it all there. And
so I think the big takeaway there is IGEL has you covered. And right. Whether Citrix has an official optimization for collaborative platform, Z, IGEL has realized that that's important and knows that in your Citrix session that needs to be enabled, and you're doing it from the IGEL side of things.
Yeah, and then of course there's still the HDMX real-time webcam redirection. I mean, there's still that type of thing. There's browser content redirection. There's still those things that have been around for a while. And if your endpoint does have the horsepower, like my laptop has an NVIDIA GPU built in, and it can certainly leverage that for accelerated graphics support or processing anything down into local endpoint. One thing we have seen, it was sort of the third thing you mentioned, was we have the ability to have like the Zoom or Teams Linux versions of the client built in locally. And we've seen customers in the last year, specifically, I've seen this in healthcare, where they have an application when they want to do like a telehealth. They'll click on it and it'll redirect that down to the endpoint, fire up, in our case, a browser, which then picks up and recognizes that, I've got to launch Zoom, and it pulls up, and now you have Zoom running locally, and you're having that conversation, from the local version of the application. So that's also an option, as well as you could do it from within the VDI session in a lot of cases too.
So I think here's one way to put it. Citrix has claimed for a couple of years now, and they're doing a good job of this, that they want the Linux client to be a first-class use case, just like Windows is in the Citrix world. And what IGEL is doing is taking the pieces that are missing or not quite there yet, so that you could just use the Workspace app for all the communication tools, which I think is coming. And you're making that work now. so that Linux, aka IGEL in this case, really does become just on par, or in some cases even ahead of what you would get in a Windows experience.
Yeah, and like I said, for us, we've had specifically a VP in the biz dev team. He's been on our podcast before, Jim Erdu. He worked at Citrix in those early years and knows that organization very well. And he's been sort of driving the relationship in the last year plus. And one of the benefits of that has been getting the engineering teams working together, on which features are being requested, which new things do we want to bring to market or whatever, and add them into the Linux client. And so for those that are familiar, there's that PDF that gets updated on, features that are available in the Workspace app, which one, Windows, Linux kind of thing, and that checkbox of things that are missing on the Linux side is beginning to shrink. So I think that's the goal. Obviously, more customer demand for that will drive innovation and engineering efforts.
And the ones that aren't going away quick enough, IGEL is creating solutions that I'll call it workarounds, but for the end user, it's not a workaround. It's native feeling.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you don't want to have a user have to do much. If you can make it work with that workaround and it still delivers a great user experience while they work to make it better and more native, that's really the key, is make sure you get all the settings right. So there's a lot of information out there on how to do some of these things if you're not familiar with it. We won't be covering all that today, but certainly reach out. We're happy to have a conversation.
I think a great example of this, and as you know, I'm a fan of Google and their Cloud Ready product, which is kind of an alternative to IGEL, but they're not doing these things. They are very, very much of the mindset, hey, if you can't do it in your Citrix session, don't worry about it. Pop out and do it native with us, because that's what they're bringing to market, and it's just an alternative approach, which is it's usable, but it doesn't have the same native look and feel as you would have in an IGEL Linux-based solution.
Yeah. I think that's really what we're driving towards, is that seamless. I'm sure that word is probably in the blog somewhere, but that seamless experience. I think there it is. Second paragraph. Last sentence.
So Chris, our coverage today is really the blog that Dan wrote, and then there's this info sheet that came out from IGEL and Citrix. You want to maybe jump into this one a little bit and cover what the more detailed conversation is that this one's about?
Yeah, so this is our Dan and his team, Dan Farrow and his team, do a really great job of putting together things like this: info sheets, data sheets, solution briefs. They go by various names. And this one is IGEL and Citrix focused, kind of hitting on some of the key points about how we work together. And so IGEL, for those that are listening in, if you're not, extremely familiar with it, we're the edge operating system, that next gen edge operating system for digital workspaces. And that's what we focus on. And we bring a lot of things together in that workspace. So those VDI plugins, those collaboration efforts, we have at least 3 versions of the Citrix Workspace app in the product at any given time, depending on the firmware version you're on. And obviously, with some of the more recent updates, you get new functionality, new feature sets. You also have to look back on what Citrix brings, and so making sure you match up these things. But this first page kind of has a little graphic there on the left side, what Citrix focuses on, where IGEL sort of fits in the middle, bringing these things together. So that's, support for the unified comms software. But then on the right side, we've also got, let's not forget, a good quality headset as well. We've got some hardware peripherals that we've added support for, new devices, existing ones, things like that, from the likes of Jabra, ePOS, and Polycom. As well as, right now I'm using, I think, primarily my Logitech webcam for this blog. So hopefully the audio is pretty good, but it's basically for me like a speakerphone. But yeah, these are things that we focused on bringing together and having, sort of that native plug and play experience when you're setting this up.
And Chris, so what you're really highlighting here is there's the work that Citrix is doing, and then there's the different platforms that Citrix may or may not be natively integrating, and then there's hardware that needs drivers and software to be supported. And IGEL is taking all that, all those ingredients and mixing them together and giving you a way to have that in your solution and make it manageable. Which we haven't really talked about that much, but just the idea of having this stuff able to work, but have it able to work in such a way that the universal management server can call upon these settings and have them engaged as needed, when needed, on the fly to any device that's connected is really a big part of the story too.
Yeah, and a small example here. We have a joint customer, IGEL, XenTegra. And just an example of sort of where the hardware software combination comes together to provide a user experience. Customer bought some laptops that are fairly new, and they ran into some native audio things, right? And so long and short of it, a support case was open. We looked at it, figure out, hey, what's the issue? Shipped one of those devices to our engineering team, and I've been watching updates. This was going on while I was on vacation. Engineering looked at it, figured out, okay, we think we know what the issue is, and it looks like, we'll have a fix for it. I think it would basically be a software fix at the end of the day. And so waiting for that to come out, and then, working together, getting back to the customer so that they ultimately, can take a breath of fresh air. But I think what's driven a lot of that is the IGEL Ready program, which is now just a year old almost in about 2 days. And it's driven innovation from hardware vendors that come out with newer hardware and wireless chipsets and other things like that, and keeping the Linux kernel updated with where IGEL is, and kind of bringing all these together. So at the end of the day, the customer has a lot of options available to them, from the UD Pocket, plugging into devices they own already or new things they're looking at, and then knowing that IGEL and our Linux OS and all the things, can bring these things together, along with our partnerships with Citrix and others. So, the second page of this info sheet kind of talks about IGEL being a Citrix Ready Endpoint Premium and Citrix Ready HDX 3D Pro certified. So that's some designations that are Citrix specific, and then we've gone through that process with Citrix, and IGEL has an equivalent thing with our IGEL Ready program that vendors can have their specific devices certified, I guess, if you will, if we're going to use that term. Knowing that, hey, if I go and buy that device, I know that it has already been certified, their drivers and everything to run on IGEL OS version, whatever. And so I think that's kind of what's driven some of this focus, is to bring marry those things together, complement each other, and obviously that's led to this great collaboration efforts on the multimedia experience for the users.
Yeah. Well, let's just run through these real quick, because I think you've used the term a couple of times here, HDX3D Pro, which is something that I've been around forever. There's actually HDX 3D, there's HDX 3D Pro. HDX 3D Pro is when you're doing VDI and you're looking for that high-end user experience that includes the ability to support like graphics, heavily graphics intense applications that need data compression, and even kind of visual effects where the visual sharpness can be turned down so that performance is there, but then it sharpens up as it needs to. Basically, all we're saying here is that IGEL is out of the box ready to work with those technologies, and there's no question as to whether or not the integration with these Citrix features are there. The first one is IGEL OS supports HDX3D Pro in Citrix real-time media engine. That's what I was just talking about, just the compression and adaptive display type of things that Citrix, and that sounds like a trivial thing, and it works in Windows because that's what Citrix focuses on first. But it doesn't work in all the other thin client vendors. It doesn't work with all the other Linux solutions. We've got a customer right now that we inherited from another partner that has several thousand endpoints that this doesn't work, and the user experience suffers because of it.
Yeah, and that's really where we've seen a lot of traction in the last year is people coming to IGEL because the user experience is suffering. And so the first point in this info sheet here is really that we've made tremendous efforts to stay in lockstep as Citrix has been rapidly bringing new features to market, putting those into the Linux Workspace app, or actually working with Citrix to drive that into the Linux Workspace app so that we could deliver these feature sets. Because Citrix's focus is really moving everything to cloud delivery. And if that's where your session's going to be coming from permanently in the future, whatever, you have to focus on these types of technologies and know that the endpoint is going to be able to take care of that. So,
and the word you used just now was cloud delivery, and that's correct. But for people, they need to understand cloud delivery just means a data center somewhere else. That could also be your colo data center. It could be XenTegra's data center. It could be Amazon, Azure, Microsoft data center. And the thing here is, the more intelligence we can get into the software is going to enable those go-to-market solutions where you don't have to host it in your data center on your local area network.
And we don't really talk about it here, but there's other vendors that are part of our Ready program where they focus on providing some of those analytics around what the user experience actually is and getting you real information. So is it the wireless? Is it the endpoint? Is it something on the network? Is it, where is the actual issue that is causing that user experience to, be great or less than great? Right. So,
it goes back to several conversations we've had in my Citrix podcast, which is security analytics, but in this case, performance analytics, whether it's using the Citrix tool or a third-party tool or both, really becomes important as you're running these things from clouds. And you make the assumption users are having good experience, and if they're not calling you, you assume it must be okay. But that's not necessarily true. A lot of times people just quit calling, and you need to be able to measure how it's going.
Yeah, I think that's really what our messaging is IGEL focuses on various things, but we also partner with some great solutions that can give you that deep information on where is the issue from a troubleshooting perspective, and then you can kind of turn your attention towards do we need to maybe reconsider the endpoints that the users are working from, or is it something else? So.
Chris, I think the main word here is partnership, and that's where the partnership between IGEL and Citrix and the end user is happening, where in some cases, the thin client vendor is just along for the ride. And so that gets us in the next one here, where Citrix and Microsoft have worked together for Teams and Zoom optimization, or Teams optimization. But Citrix is also working on Zoom optimization with those folks. A lot of these other vendors are just leveraging that and going to market with that. And what IGEL is doing here, which we talked about a little while ago, is we're adding additional collaborative platforms into the story. The ones that Citrix isn't specifically focused on solving as quickly as these other two more popular ones.
Yeah, because if you look at that last sentence there, one of the last sentences in that second section there, if you can offload a lot of that processing down to the endpoint, you don't have to beef up your VDIs in the cloud, which might be a little bit more expensive costs. But also having tools where you can say, all right, will the endpoint before I go that route be able to support this? And so that's always good to know too. And so we know what Citrix requirements are, and then you can kind of match that to the endpoint. And so we've actually created a tool internally that we can share with certainly partners as well on how to identify the use case. And we know what they're looking for. What endpoints might match that if they're looking at IGEL ready devices or something. And certainly if they have existing devices, it'd be able to match up. Okay, what kind of processor is running, how much RAM, that type of thing, and then you can kind of figure out, okay, yeah, they're going to be great, or they might want to beef those up or swap them out with something.
Right. And that's become even more relevant with the shortage of chips and the desire to reuse old stuff.
Yeah, I saw. I don't know if it was real or not, but I saw some thing where this guy, I think, used Saran wrap or something like that, and he had some chips, and he basically wrapped his body with this. He got caught somewhere in the airport, or I don't know, but maybe it was real or not. But just chips. It's incredible just the stories are coming out with the desire for chips. It'll be
Mhm.
interesting. And I think we've talked about it on before on some of these calls, but yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of devices that are Core i5s, i7s, or whatever that can be beefy thin clients.
Yeah. This next session talks about the hardware accelerated graphics around H.264 codecs. What is that really?
Yeah, I mean it's funny because while we're talking here, I'm watching a Teams chat, and so we just came out with a new version of our firmware, which has the Citrix Workspace app 2106. And there was a notice in there that something is no longer experimental, right? So what we're talking about here is advanced H.264 auxiliary graphics. We have settings in the product for that. And it's really about decompressing, right? So IGEL has codec licensing built into the Workspace Edition license. So if you have that, you already have the codecs to be able to handle that. But it basically tells the GPU on the endpoint to leverage that decoding, and so that's where that offloading down to the device. You got an NVIDIA GPU like my laptop, I'll be completely fine if I maybe have nothing. If I don't have an NVIDIA GPU or whatever, then that. But it's really this, software talking to hardware kind of, and obviously, what are some of the things we've seen use cases, right? So we've had some production firms that are doing commercials and movies and things like that, as well as architecture firms, CAD. Certainly on the healthcare side, they might be looking at images and various things. And so some really intensive applications, and we've seen some focus on the type of endpoint testing, various types of endpoints to be able to handle some of this.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about. But yeah, that Teams chatter as I'm sitting there watching it is they've been sitting there saying, yeah, the Citrix Workspace app, they'll need to enable in some case, depending on the use case. There's a Citrix BCR enable webcam mic. You should work fine, and it's no longer experimental. So these are all new things that are being talked about internally as new feature sets come out. And it's nice to see the collaborative efforts. These are guys over in Europe that are chatting at their end of the day or middle of the day, whatever. But that information is getting shared internally for everybody to learn from. So.
And Chris, the whole point here is so that you can compress it on the back end and send it really thin across the wire, and then decompress it on the endpoint, and it all happens fast and seamlessly. I'll tell you a quick story. I used to listen to the Howard Stern show, and he was they're streaming it. They were streaming off their website the audio, and he made a comment one time. Yeah, we'll never be able to get the video. It's just too much. And then of course now everything streams over video. You watch something from just about anywhere on the planet. And these codecs have had these codecs and the ability to integrate the software codecs with hardware that understands how to do something with it when it gets it has really changed the game for real-time collaboration and video consumption.
Absolutely. I mean, I wasn't sure. We actually, given a shared internet and on vacation, but we were able to have no issues watching like an Amazon Prime show a couple of times while we were on vacation.
Question for you: how many times did it buffer?
0, to be
honest.
0.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah. You go back just 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, you're like, man, every 5 minutes I got to sit here and watch it pause and buffer. It's bandwidth's gotten better, of course, yes, but like you're talking about, you're on a hotel or a resort, whatever, shared Wi-Fi, and it can only handle so much. But the code coming across from that back end to your endpoint, and your endpoint's ability to do something with it is just that's what's really changed the most.
Yeah, no doubt.
And that's where Citrix and others, because I've been around this stuff 30 years almost, but then the last 10, watching them consume those consume those standard industry codecs and do something with them within this product that's continue to make the product better and better and better from the user perspective.
Absolutely. So I think, the rest of kind of this info sheet, we've kind of mentioned it earlier, but IGEL has long had multimedia codec packs in the operating system. There used to be a separate license in our older versions 10, but now everything's sort of included in the base version 11 Workspace edition license. So that's our WE license for those paying attention. And then, these additional things, right? I mentioned earlier, we've long had the Skype stuff built in. A lot of that's transitioning to Teams now, and more recently, Cisco. We've added stuff in there for the Cisco WebEx. I keep getting it confused. Sorry. There's WebEx meetings. There's WebEx itself, and then there's the JVDI Jabber, is what most people are familiar with.
Well, and Chris, this probably goes without being said, but the concepts here apply to real-time collaboration and meetings. It also applies to VoIP type of soft phone scenarios as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, call centers. That's been a big area we've seen. I think you've dealt with some of those types of customers too. What type of device should they use to get the job done? Do they need video? Is it just audio? Is it what type of headset, and sort of, the last piece of what we're talking about here is, we have a large number of headsets that we support, right out of the gate. But the key vendors that out there, if you're looking for, absolute high quality poly EPOS Jabra, that, some of those might be Bluetooth type things. You can kind of walk around, have a little more flexibility versus what we're doing here with tethered headsets plugged in. But yeah, I mean, that's for us. That's we'll continue to focus on that as these vendors come out with new, better and better hardware.
Well, and so Chris, to kind of wrap it up, you got the plug in and go scenario, which you were just talking about. I'm a big fan of wired stuff, but if you really want to go down the Bluetooth headset route, there's several. I just encourage people to check out the IGEL website before just buying something and assuming it'll work. And then finally, the part where we talked about a while ago, universal management suite and the ability to manage all this for the endpoints from a central location, but with scale and power in mind. All this just boils down to the fact that Citrix and IGEL have a partnership. They realize that this unified collaboration piece is the most difficult piece of this whole solution that has still yet to be 100% solved, but has come really close now. And the pandemic and the scenario around it's really driven that to happen even faster than it would have.
Absolutely. And we'll continue to focus on that, right? I think at some point this will all be plug and play. Right now, it's close as far as setting all this up, but there's definitely some stuff that needs to be matched up with on the back end with the Citrix versions of stuff. So we've got a good guide out there that is updated as new things come out. It's on our community site. We've probably talked about it before, but it's the full focus is to help you understand all the stuff that you need on the IGEL side, but also on the other side, and bringing all these things together so that at the end of the day, you have a great user experience.
And that's probably the section that's missing here in this article or these two documents is the community. And at the end of the day, a lot of times I'll advise people on what solutions to choose based on the community, how active it is, and the size of it. There's other thin client players out there that just don't have a community that's passionate around the technology that's there to lend a hand as needed. And at the end of the day, that's probably as valuable as anything.
Yeah. And if it's not been out on LinkedIn yet, for those listening in, our good friend Doug Brown, who has built the IGEL community, has now been, his role is still there, but he's now focused on the IGEL knowledge information. So he covers now the knowledge base, the community, and so bringing all this information together so that our customers and partners, everybody sort of benefits from that information that's, as we cover every other week on the community blog posts, he's now, his mission is really kind of bringing all that together. So we probably need to get him back on at some point. I'll reach out and see when he's available.
Yeah, see if we can get him on to talk about his latest role and what they're doing over there. Well, Chris, I'm out of time. I've got to jump to the next in the series of all-day meetings that I have, which is kind of the life I live. But I appreciate you jumping on and tackling this issue and what IGEL is doing. And we'll get this out there. And if people have questions, they can certainly reach out to us via email or just LinkedIn any way possible. But certainly a conversation. I had a customer call the other day from the United Kingdom that I can't even do business in the United Kingdom, but they called and wanted to talk about this because they heard us talking about it. And so I think there's definitely more need to keep evangelizing what's going on in this part of the space.
Absolutely. So maybe you expand over there, open up an office, perhaps.
It's on the wish list. There's other countries coming first, but it's certainly on the wish list. And if there's anybody listening that's over in Europe or one of the countries there that is part of the EU, then I'd love to chat at some point.
Awesome. Andy, always a pleasure, man. Have a good one.
Thanks, Chris. We'll do it again. Thanks.
Take care.